Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session in which we will be studying and having a short talk on the philosophy and wisdom of fasting. We all know that the month of Ramadan is about to dawn upon us. It is a very holy month. It is a month in which all of us concentrate more towards our spiritual needs, and we are naturally attracted towards doing good deeds. So it is in the fitness of things that while we are about to start this month, we take a look at some of the important issues that we will be facing, and at the same time, we would also want that we are able to understand the philosophy, the wisdom, and the underlying reason of this very, very important worship ritual. We all know that this ritual is mandatory for every person who is able to fast in this month, and so let's start with the background of fasting. And the first thing that I'd like to point out in this background is that what exactly is the reason that we are obligated, or it has been made mandatory upon us. So you see, every person has two planes of existence. He or she would have a physical plane of existence, and he or she would have a spiritual plane of existence. In other words, we are a compound made from body and soul. So we have a body and we have a soul, and both these components need nourishment. So the nourishment of the body, we all know, we eat, we drink, we have our carnal desires, we fulfill those desires. So these are the needs of the body. At the same time, our soul also has needs. And if we study religious scriptures, the Bible and the Quran, we will come to know that the soul, the nourishment of the soul, or the fodder or the food of the soul, is the word of God. To attach yourself to the word of God as much as possible. Now, during the whole year, our spiritual and our physical needs are like they are intertwined one another. In fact, if I may say, and I think you would agree, that our physical needs take the better of our spiritual needs, and they always dominate our spiritual needs, or most of the time. So, for 1 month and let's say 16 hours per day or so, our physical needs are somehow made to vanish so that we are not able to fulfill them, and the purpose is that that spiritual soul that we have, the spiritual existence that we have, is unhampered. It's not bogged down by our physical needs. So, summing up, we can say that this month is the month in which our spiritual needs, which need to be developed, which need to be nurtured, which need to be nourished, are given special importance. And by making us give up these physical needs, we are made to concentrate more on our spiritual needs. So, for people who think that fasting is something like depriving ourselves from food and drink and our essential desires, we need to make them understand that this is because those carnal desires or those physical needs are getting the better of us during the whole year. And it is like a workshop in which our physical needs are made to let go, so that our spiritual needs, or our, in other words, our spiritual self, is it's like free from that chain, or that those fetters which are found as a result of our physical self and our physical needs dominating our spiritual needs. So everyone who acknowledges the fact that spiritual existence needs to be nourished and fulfilled will find this to be a very important month, because it is here that you will nourish your soul. And why do we need to nourish the soul? Of course, the question is very, very important. We know that our physical needs, we need to nourish them because the body has to stay strong. It is exactly the same for our spiritual needs. If you want your soul to remain strong, you have to nourish it. And what does it mean to have a strong soul? It means that you will be inclined more towards righteousness. It will become easy for you to do good things, and it will become easy for you to evade or give up sins. So that is why this spiritual fodder is essential. That is why our soul needs to be strengthened, so that for the next 11 months, we are able to ward off the desires and the allurements of evil. The second important thing that I'd like to point to you regarding this background is that why is it that the month of Ramadan was selected for fasting? After all, there were other months as well. So, what is so special about the month of Ramadan? So, we come to know from the Quran that the revelation of the Quran began in the month of Ramadan. Shahru Ramadan allazi unzila fihi al-Quran. It is the month of Ramadan in which the Quran started its revelation. So, in order to show gratitude to the Almighty, in order to show our thankfulness to the Almighty that He has given us this gift of the Quran, we fast in the month in which the Quran was revealed. So, it was because of this revelation of the Quran in the month of Ramadan that, as an expression of gratitude, we thank Almighty for giving us this spiritual fodder, giving us this spiritual guidance. And as a result, it is this month which has been selected for this purpose. The third important thing in the background that I would like to suggest here and also point out is that as far as fasting is concerned, the Arabic word we all know is Saum. And the word Saum in the Arabic language, in classical Arabic language, is spoken or was spoken for horses who would be deprived from food and drink, so that they could be made tough and resilient. So when they would be deprived of food and drink, so that they could withstand periods of time in which they will have to go without food and drink, they would become more conducive to such an environment. So about such horses who are deprived of food and drinking, in order to make them more tough, in order to make them more resilient, the Arabic word saum was used. And it has been adopted as a ritual. The same word has been adopted as a ritual because in this ritual, we are exactly doing what was done in the case of the horses. So we are depriving ourselves of our basic human needs in order to make us strong. And of course, our inner strength, as earlier on said, it stems from our spiritual existence. It stems from our spiritual uh, strength. The more we are strong in our spirit and soul, the more we are able to be resilient and we are able to ward off evil. Now, let us come to the Quranic directive of Psalm itself. So, the Quran tells us that as far as fasting is concerned, the purpose of fasting, as you can see from the famous Quranic verse that we all almost know by heart, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, kutiba alaykum as-siyam, kama kutiba alal lazina min qablikum, la'allakum tattaqun. Believers, we have made fasting incumbent upon you, the way we had made it incumbent upon earlier nations, which again tells us that fasting is nothing new. And we know that the fast is a ritual that existed in the Sharia of the Israelites, and it is something that they still follow, although there are some distortions in it, but it is something which is not new to the Sharia of Prophet Muhammad. And then it says the reason for that is the words are Kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba alal lazina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun, so that you attain piety, so that you are able to become pious individuals. And what exactly is piety? Piety is to restrain yourself and to abide by the limits of God. So, in order to abide by the limits of God, we have to restrain ourselves, we have to control ourselves. And this is the purpose of fasting. Now, one can ask that how exactly is this purpose achieved for fasting? How does the fast create taqwa? How does the fast make us pious? So, the answer is very simple. You see, first of all, it is the accountability in the month of fasting that makes us pious. You see, all of us, in spite of the fact we might be hiding from people, we might not be in front of people, that there is not a single person, even the most sinful of people, whenever they fast, they never deceive the Almighty. In other words, they would never break their fast. They would never go in the kitchen, in a way that they are hiding for other people. Because after all, there are so many chances that you get. You can just, hide from the eyes of people and start eating or drinking without knowledge of any other people, and people would think that you're fasting. But no one does that. Why? Because the person thinks that God is seeing him. So, in other words, when you abstain from eating and drinking, even in private, even when no one is seeing you, what does it mean? It means that you have the fear of God. And that exactly what piety is, that you don't cross the limits. You know that if no one is watching, at least God is watching, so I must not eat or drink. And it is this feeling of accountability that actually nurtures that piety. Because what else can you expect? That if you're always thinking that I might do wrong, and if I do wrong, I'll be held accountable. And if that feeling of accountability pervades the next 11 months, we can clearly see how it can affect our lives. If we are not fasting and we have that feeling in us that, well, God is watching us, we must remain pious, we must remain righteous, we must abstain from sins, especially those which are hidden. So just as we are fasting, and when we are fasting and we are alone, no one is seeing us, we don't break our fast by deceiving God, because of course we cannot deceive God, but we can deceive people. In a similar way, the objective is for the rest of those 11 months, we have that feeling of accountability in us. And we always think that if no one is watching, so what? At least God is watching over us. And the second way in which this piety is achieved is through the vehicle, I would say, of patience. And the biggest thing which fasts inculcate in us, we all know and we have all experienced, is this super trait of patience. All of us need this patience, because without patience, without steadfastness, without perseverance, we cannot move along and have a good relationship with God. Because you see, life is a challenge. Life is a challenge in which you face all kinds of trials and tribulations. And if you have that patience to withstand them, with that patience comes that acceptance of the limits of God. And this precisely what piety or taqwa is. So these are the two ways in which our fasts engender taqwa in ourselves. First, by giving us that feeling of accountability that if no one is watching, that's not an issue. God is watching us. And second, when we abstain from our desires and we exercise patience. And of course, as we all know, that fasting is not just merely about abstaining from our desires, it's also abstaining from all evil attitudes, not venting our anger, not abusing others, not being rash in our attitude. So all these abstinent behaviors, they are part of fasting. And if we don't give due regard to them, then we would have earned nothing but depriving ourselves of food and water. Because you see, depriving ourselves of food and water or our carnal desires is not an end in itself, it's a means to an end. And that end is that we have to exercise those, or we have to abide by the limits of God. So the important thing here is that as far as the Quran is concerned, it does not at all ask a person in any way that he or she has to in any way do anything which is artificial. It is something which is very natural. We abstain from a lot of things. So this is a month or long workshop in which we are required to abstain from these things, so that all of us are able to contribute in some way or the other in becoming better human beings. Now, I would also like to point out certain important areas in which we need to reevaluate ourselves, and that is that we have to understand that fasting itself should not become a ritual of festivity. It's a ritual in which we have to remain simple. The keep it simple rule is something that we have to exercise. At times, we don't realize that fasting becomes a festivity, and this is especially true in the cases of elaborate forms of banquets that are thrown not only at iftar time, which was generally the rule, but now also people are awake most part of the night, and they have that indulgence in them, in which they make the whole sehri or the seher time to be a time of festivity as well. So that is also something that needs to be checked. Whether it's the seher time or whether it's the iftar time, these are times of devotion towards God. These are times in which, yes, you have to eat food, and occasionally, of course, if you go out for, any sort of dinner or banquet, or maybe for an iftar or a seher, that is perhaps okay. But making it a habit, and every second day, if you start doing this, it'll become more of a festive occasion. Then the very purpose that it has will also get lost. So the first thing that we have to understand is that it's not a month of festivity. It's a month of austerity, not festivity, austerity. To be austere, to be simple, to be as devoted to God as you can. We have all 11 months for all that festivity. For this 1 month, we have to devote ourselves as much as we can towards that simplicity in our food as well. The second thing that happens as a wrongdoing in fasting is that we vent our anger on people, and then when someone scolds us, we say as well, "I'm sorry, I was empty stomach and I just lost my temper." Now, this is absolutely no excuse. So, if you are venting anger and if you are doing something which is unbecoming, and then you make this excuse that you are fasting, that is again something which is not acceptable in the sight of God. In fact, if ever anything is acceptable, is to exercise patience. And whenever someone says something that might provoke you, instead of getting angry, the words that our Prophet has told us that they should be enough, and that is, I am fasting. Just tell that person, well, I am not going to reply to you because I am fasting. And my fasting is not just abstinence from food, it's also abstinence from using any bad language. The third wrongdoing in fasting, dear viewers, which we often see, is that at times we procrastinate the fast, and we it is as if we are trying to do away with the fast by either sleeping through the fast, or in most cases somehow doing activities that at times are not conducive. But the most important thing here is that because people are awake for most part of the night, so when they start to sleep right after Fajr, uh, so a better part of the fast itself is spent in sleeping. Now, this is also something which is a tendency that should be checked, because you see, if you are going to fast, then of course you have to bear that fast. It's not an easy ritual at times. It becomes hard, especially when you have physical activity going on. So instead of lulling ourselves to sleep, we have to take it as a challenge and spend that time while being awake most of the time. Of course, it's not the fact that you have to remain awake all the time, but the fast should itself not be spent in such a way that you are sleeping for the most part of it, because that would then take away its very important significance. Now, the other thing that I'd like to point out regarding the month of fasting is that basically it's the month of accountability. It's a month in which we need to take charge of ourselves. We need to reevaluate our priorities. We need to see whether we are performing all our duties as a human being and as a person who is related to our society. So we have to reevaluate if we are a good father, a good son, a good brother, a good husband, and so on and so forth. We have many forms of existence, we have many levels of connections. So, this is a month in which we have to be more introvert in our activities. And that introversion, of course, relates to how we take charge of ourselves. We hold ourselves accountable before our own selves. We need not go to other people. It's like a time of soul searching. It's a time of spent in seclusion as much as you can, because it's a time in which you evaluate the priorities in life. And if we are able to evaluate these priorities in life, we will always be in a position to revamp them or to restructure them. What happens is that in 11 months, we are going in a routine. It's like a fast routine. It's like a machine rolling, and the cogs, all of them rolling with that machine. And seldom do we stop and get a chance to reevaluate. But this is one month in which it is as if everything comes to a standstill, or at least it gets a new start. So that has to be used for our own accountability, for our self accountability. And this is precisely what the Prophet has said in one of his narratives, that Man Sama Ramadanan Imanam wa ihtisaban. You see, he who fasted the month of Ramadan, Imanam wa ihtisaban, while being aware of the fact that he is a believer, wa ihtisaban, which means that holding himself accountable, غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ, his minor sins of the past will be forgiven. غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ. But that can only happen if we have that attitude of self accountability. And that self accountability, as I said, is something which should pervade these 30 days or 29 days. All of us have to look where we are going wrong. All of us need to take a step back from the humdrum of life and see what our priorities in life are, how we are behaving, how we are faring. Are we good individuals as far as our brethren are concerned? How do people evaluate us? And you know what? The best way to know how you fare in life, and perhaps for that you don't even need to talk to people, is to imagine how people who are responsible to you, or how people who are answerable to you, might think of you. So if you are a boss in a firm, or if you are any position or a professional, there will be people who will be answerable to you. And if that is not the case, nevertheless, there are people towards whom, I mean, who look up to you and who in some form or the other are answerable to you. And of course, all of us might be having children as well. And they, in some sense, are accountable to us in some ways as well. So in order to evaluate where we stand, the best feedback or very appropriate feedback that you can get is from these near and dear ones, especially those who are answerable to you in your professional life. And if you imagine how your person who is answerable to you is going to talk about you if he's relieved from his job and he goes to some other company, some other place, and what impression would he carry? And if someone asks you, you were working with such and such a person, how exactly would be your impression about that person? If you just close your eyes and recollect, it'll be sufficient to make us realize how people think about us. So again, that is something that needs that patience. It needs time. It needs devotion. It needs concentration. And the fast is the best time that we can provide ourselves with this motivation. We have more time on our hands, especially in Muslim countries where timings are they are lessened. We have more time to our own selves. We can think more to our own selves. So instead of using that time in other activities, the best utility of that time is introspection, is self-evaluation. And also in many Western countries, there are companies and there are concerns in which they know that their Muslim employees are fasting, and they at times do relax their hours as well. So this facility at times is available there as well. But if it is not, even then we all have this sense of accountability inbuilt in us through this vehicle of fasting. So we should use that as much as possible. And if we are able to do so, then we will realize that we have really earned something out of it. For remember, the best outcome of fasting is after fasting, after the month of Ramadan. If you want to see whether you had a successful month of Ramadan, the best way to know about that is to see how you behave in the next 11 months. For you see, the Ramadan is not a month which is an end in its own self. It's also a means to an end. So the means, of course, is it's like a workshop of, of spiritual uplifting. And when you pass through that workshop, you have 11 months to live your life. And then it is here where you will come to realize whether you had a good Ramadan or not. Because if the spillover effect of that Ramadan in the next 11 months is such that you are more God conscious, you are more sensitive, you are more concerning of people, you have a stronger God connection, then that would mean that yes, your Ramadan was something which gave you something for the next 11 months. However, as soon as the Ramadan ends and you're back to your own ways, because as we generally think that it's like a single month, it's a 1 month package in which you do all kinds of good things, and then you just forget about what we're going to do in the next 11 months. So this would be like sacrificing the whole objective. The objective of Ramadan, as I said, it comes forward, it bespeaks of our own impropriety or propriety in the next 11 months. So those 11 months are the months in which our integrity, our character, our honesty, the way we behave when we face the challenges of life, the trials of life, that's going to count. And if our Ramadan was good, we would be a stronger person. We would be able to resist desires, especially the carnal desires, as much as possible. Now, I'd like to also point out some important things regarding the month of Ramadan, which at times need to be divulged because they have become sore points, and I would also say they are have become part of our understanding of Islam, and they actually are misconceptions. The first thing that I'd like to point out here is the sighting of the moon with which we begin and end the month of Ramadan. Because of not understanding a certain narrative of the Prophet, people now think that unless we sight the moon through the naked eye or through a telescope, moon sighting, in other words, is essential to signal the start of the month of Ramadan. We need to understand this, that as far as the beginning of a month is concerned, the only means that were available in the times of the Prophet was moon sighting to find out whether the new month or the lunar month has begun or not. Today, with the advent of a lot of astronomical calculations, there are other means as well in which we are able to very closely predict the arrival of the lunar month. Moon sighting itself is not required. And in many Muslim countries, they have given up this, and they rely on calculations. And at times, what they do is that they rely on calculations, and they also, as a secondary reinforcement, they sight the moon. And sometimes they do make a correction, but I have seen calendars made for 15 years, 20 years in advance, which give you an exact prediction of when the lunar month is going to start. The month of Ramadan is a lunar month, and when it's going to end. So this whole controversy that enshrouds us every year, in which the sighting of the moon to begin the month of Ramadan, and then to celebrate Eid to end the month of Ramadan, we have a whole, we all know what we go through, and also we make a laughing stock of ourselves because we have those differences in which people would not agree whether they have sighted the moon or not, and we have Eids being celebrated and the month of Ramadan being celebrated at various times. So I think this is the first thing that we have to understand, that moon sighting is not a religious ritual at all. It's just a means to determine the arrival of the new month. And now, just as in the previous times, we had no means to find out time but through a sundial. And through a sundial, we would be able to know whether the sun has going down, or whether it's a time of sunset or sunrise. And everyone had to have that sundial or some other means to find out the time for the prayer. But this now is not required with the arrival of wristwatches and other watches. We are now able to know the times, and we can offer the prayer without looking at the sun. In a very similar way, this is the case with the fast as well. So I wish that, because this is something which is beyond our own control. I mean, we are just individuals. Sighting the moon is something which relates to state. So the state machinery has to realize this, that if they are able to predict the arrival of the lunar month, as has been the case with the arrival of these astronomical calculations, then this is not something that is needed at all. The second thing that is a question that often people ask is the Tarawih prayer. What exactly is the status of the Tarawih prayer? So let me just give you a very brief history of the Tarawih prayer. And from this, you will realize that how it came to be an integral part of the fast. And people now think that unless they offer the Tarawih prayer, perhaps their fast would be incomplete. So this happened in the times of the Prophet, when in the month of Ramadan, once he came out to his mosque. So remember that his room was very adjacent to the mosque, especially when he would stay with his wife Aisha. So it happened once that he came into the mosque. He would normally pray the Tahajjud prayer in his own chamber, in his own compound. But it happened in one of those months that he felt that he should come out. So since his chamber was just adjacent to the mosque, the Masjid Nabawi, so he came out and started praying Tahajjud. And we know that the narratives say fi jawfil layl, which means in the middle of the night. And of course, the Tahajjud prayer is recited out loud. I mean, you make a loud recital. So in those times, when people were living close together, when they heard the Prophet reciting the Quran in the middle of the night, there were people who were living close by. They heard him and they got excited, and they gathered in the mosque, and he started to pray behind him. And of course, on the first night, just a few people came. But when morning time came, they spread this news that, well, the Prophet prayed at night, the Tahajjud prayer, and so we were able to listen to him. So other people got informed. The next night, we know that more people gathered, and the Prophet, of course, he knew that people were present, and he was praying, and people were praying behind him. And then in the third night, it looked as if even more people had joined, and once again, the Prophet was heard as praying, and people followed him. Now, in the fourth night, it seemed as the whole mosque was jam-packed, but the Prophet did not come out from his chamber. And in the morning, he actually informed them that he said that I was aware that you people are outside at the time of the Tahajjud, but I did not come out because I just thought that if you start following me in this way, then this Tahajjud prayer might become incumbent upon all of you, and it would become part of our religion. I would not have liked this to happen. I would have liked it to remain an optional prayer for you, so I never came out. And this is all that he did ever. And then we know that there were people who said that, well, we are not able to offer the Tahajjud prayer at the time that you are offering, because at times it's difficult for us to get up and to prepare Sehri and at the same time also pray. And also many of us are not, we don't have extensive memory such that we have a lot of Quran in our memories. So the Prophet said that if you're not able to get up, then what you can do is that you can pray the Tahajjud prayer with the Isha prayer. So the Prophet prayed the Tahajjud prayer, He allowed the tahajjud prayer, people who could not get up in the tahajjud, to be prayed with the Isha prayer. This is what happened during his own times. This continued to happen, and people would start. People who could get up in the morning at the tahajjud time, whether it was Ramadan or whether it was not Ramadan, they would offer the tahajjud prayer, and others who were not able to, they would offer the tahajjud prayer with the Isha prayer, and it got shortened to the three witrs which people normally offered. This continued until the time of Caliph Umar. In the time of the Caliph Umar, he was once passing by the mosque and he saw that people were praying this prayer at the time of the Tahajjud, and they were praying in various sections. So he said that this looks very, I mean, it's like doesn't look a very disciplined action. So he appointed Ubay ibn Ka'b as their leader. He said, well, every one of you should now pray at this time. So this was not the Tahajjud time. This was the Isha time actually. It was right after Isha. And he did not participate in that prayer. And he said, وَالَّتِي تَنَامُونَ أَنْهَا أَفْضَلُ مِنَ الَّتِي تَقُومُونَ. That what you are praying in lieu of the real prayer is far better. So he did not become part of the Tarawih or the Witr prayer with the Isha prayer. And he said, I'm going to pray it at its own time, which is the Tahajjud time. And right after Caliph Umar, this became a established practice that after the time of Isha, people, or right after the Isha prayer, they would gather and they would pray the Tahajjud prayer in the form of Witr, and then there would be 3 or 5 or 7 Witrs that they would pray, and this would continue. And this is how, in the times of Caliph Umar, this Witr prayer or the Tahajjud prayer became part of the Isha prayer, and after some time, it came to be called as a Tarawih prayer. So, in a nutshell, the Tarawih prayer is basically the Tahajjud prayer which the Prophet used to pray at the time of Tahajjud, but he allowed people to pray it with the Isha prayer, whether it's the Ramadan or not. I mean, all parts of the year. And in Ramadan, especially when Caliph Umar saw that people were praying the Tahajjud prayer with the Tarawih prayer at the Isha time, he said, well, you should have a single Jamaat. And it was from his times that Muslims are now offering this Witr prayer in the form of a congregation in Ramadan, thinking that they are offering a new prayer, whereas it was nothing but a Tahajjud prayer being offered at the Tarawih time. And the important thing all along is that it's an optional prayer. It was never made mandatory by the Prophet. So summing up, we can say that this Tarawih prayer is basically the Tahajjud prayer. It is prayed today in the mosques, so there is no obligation to finish the Quran, as has become accustomed today, that we finish the Quran in 30 days. And we read the whole Quran at a very fast pace, which at times is something which sacrifices the very need of understanding the Quran, or at least reciting it in a measured way. So we need to understand that the Tarawih prayer is actually the Tahajjud prayer there. And if a person is really going to do something and he can reap the benefit of that, is that he can pray, he should make an effort to offer this at its own original time, which is the Tahajjud time. So if you are able to offer 3 witrs or 5 witrs or any amount that you are able to do so, the best time for that is to do it just before Sehri, because most of us are going to get up for Sehri, they are going to eat Sehri. So just about, let's say, 20 minutes or 30 minutes before that, you can offer as much as you can. The minimum amount is 3 witrs. So that would be counted as your Tahajjud prayer, and that is in fact what the Prophet wanted. The third thing that I'd like to point out as a misconception, which also maybe not a misconception, it is more of a misunderstanding, and at times it causes people to adopt cumbersome ways to deal with it. And that is that there are situations in which a person is not able to fast because of either the nature of work he's doing or the nature of season that he finds himself or herself in. For example, there could be situations in which the daylight time is very long, and this is the case which happens near the poles, or right near them, if not right on top of them. We have a very long day, like 23 hours or 24 hours. Similarly, at times we have a very long night as well. So, I mean, there are various outlets. I mean, there are various things which the Quran has actually given us in order to understand that whenever fasting becomes difficult, either because of long daylight hours or because of the fact that the nature of your job is such that the weather is very oppressive, you have to work out in the fields, and for example, it is very hot or very cold, then the formula which the Quran has given is is something from which we can really find a solution to such issues as well. So the Quran says that whenever a person is sick or he is on a journey, he's traveling, he can defer his fasts. فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيدًا أَوْ عَلَى سَفَرٍ فَعِدَّةٌ مِنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرَ. So if he's traveling or if he is sick, he need not fast. He can make up for these lost fasts in other parts of the year. So by analogy, whenever fasting becomes difficult for us due to any reason, I mean, we should try our best to fast, but if it becomes virtually, I mean, impossible or very difficult to us for fast, then we can defer that fast to some other time of the year in which we are able to do so. And this, in other words, will be something which will, of course, not reap the blessings of Ramadan, because we would lose them, but then the obligation of keeping the fast would be fulfilled. And if we are able to distribute or stagger these fasts in a way that we fast some of these, we keep some of these fasts in the month of Ramadan and some others later on, if the difficulty persists, then this is something in which you can reap part of the blessings of Ramadan, and of course the remaining ones we can always do so in the later part of the year. Another important question that arises in the month of fasting is that can we, if there are people who are sick and so there are injections which are intravenous, or they are, of course, we are inoculated in various ways. Here the answer would be that as long as the injection does not carry anything which is going to provide you strength, as long as it is medicinal, its purpose is medicinal purely, I mean, just a medicine which is being administered to you, then that would be fine. However, any other form of injection in which, for example, if you're given a drip or a glucose injection in which you're given energy, that would be that would be against the spirit of the fast. So therefore, any other sort of injection should be fine. Another important question regarding fasting which arises is that as far as inhalers are concerned, what should we do? Because there are people who are asthmatic. Again, this is something which we have to understand, that using of an inhaler is something which is absolutely allowed. It's not going to in any way affect the fast or break the fast in any way. Same is the case with using the toothpaste or perfumes. So as long as you don't swallow the toothpaste, I mean, you just spit it out, you gargle and spit it out, that is fine. Perfumes themselves, you don't use them, I mean, you don't drink them in any way. So, I mean, if you use them on your clothes or your skin, that is also absolutely fast. And lastly, the thing which I would like to also point out here is that there is a certain amount of sanctity that we attach to the last Friday, which we call the Jumatul Wida. We think that it has a special significance. Well, it does not carry any significance at all, and it has just become prominent, or it's just become famous. Other than that, it's just a normal fast. Yes, the fast of Friday is something, because Friday itself is a blessed day. It does carry some reward, but because it's the last Friday of the month of Ramadan, does that carry something very special in it? No, I'm afraid it's not. It has become very a sort of a celebration that we think that the Jumatul Wida fast has a special significance, but no, it doesn't have any special significance. It's the way all other Friday fasts would have. The last or the parting Friday fast is the same. So these were some of the important questions that could have arisen in this holy month, and I'm now going to end my session and talk here. And if you have any questions regarding the month of Ramadan and fasting, please raise them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our first question of the day comes from Shabnam. Shabnam, please go ahead.
Ji sir. Sir, just wanted to ask, what does the word Tarawih mean? Just wanted to know as to why this name was given to the Tahajjud prayer in Ramadan.
So the word Tarawih is the plural of Tarwiyah, and Tarwiyah is the name given to the gap in which you sit between 4 rakats. I mean, because in those times, after every 4 rakats, people would sit and then they would offer the next 4. So that break or the intermittent part was called Tarwiyah, and its plural is Tarawih. So that is how this prayer became famous for. Because they used to sit after every 4, and that gap would signify that now the next 4 is going to come.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Akram Bhatti, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. Sir, gave us very good advice and covered almost everything. But I have one question that's left about nursing mom. If somebody, some lady is nursing the young baby,
Yes.
and if she fasts, she cannot nurse her properly.
Well, nursing itself does not break the fast, but but you need to seek the advice of a doctor. So that the lady must consult her doctor whether she's physically fit to keep a fast or not. Because that's something that she can ask the doctor about. But feeding a baby or nursing a baby does not break the fast.
No, she says that she would not have enough milk to
well, that's what I'm saying. If the doctor says so, then she should abstain from fasting, and she should, I mean, make up for these missed fasts later on. I think the best advice that she would get is from her doctor. If the doctor says that the milk production will be not sufficient or something else is the matter, and she should not go for the fast, then fine. Then she should not keep the fast, but she will have to keep them later on.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. Our next question comes from the chat that asks, can a person be excused of Ramadan fasting if his job requires him to work during the night hours, and because of this routine, it causes weakness during the day for him?
I think I gave a principled reply to this as well, and that is, I mean, this is something that you need to ask yourself. If it is difficult for you to fast for any reason, we have got two very clear examples from the Quran. And the Quran has said that if you are sick, which means that you are incapacitated to fast, or you are traveling, these are two examples which the Quran has said that in such cases it becomes difficult to fast. So if you think by the same token, if you have a life routine in which fasting becomes very cumbersome or difficult for you, then of course, as the Quran has said, then you can defer that fast to some other part of the year.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Baran Nashur, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, my question is about the concept of Laylatul Qadr, as there are many stories about Laylatul Qadr that, for example, it's in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. Some people say it's on the odd nights. Some people say, I think in the Hanafi Mazhab, they say it's on the 27th. Most probably, and they even celebrated with like Laylatul Qadr at the mosque or something. So I wanted to ask, what is the true facts about Laylatul Qadr?
So interestingly, when the Prophet was asked about the Laylatul Qadr, he himself said that I forgot exactly the time which God had told me. I mean, God did communicate Laylatul Qadr, the exact night to the Prophet, but he, in one of his answers, he said that I have now forgotten, but all that I can remember is that it did occur in the last 10 days. And when people asked more, he said it did occur in the odd nights of those last 10 days. And when we regard the 27th or 23rd or 25th or any other night, we give it preference. This has no basis at all. It's just conjecture. So what the Prophet said was that it did occur in those odd nights, which just tells us that this is how the Prophet felt about it. As far as the fact is concerned that it comes every year, that is also that we cannot say for sure. Maybe it comes once in 5 years and 10 years. Because you see, this is a night in which the Almighty says that He takes important decisions, and these decisions are communicated to Gabriel and the rest of the battalion of the angels, and they descend with those decisions for the implementation. And as a result, we all know that basically the revelation of the Quran also began in Laylatul Qadr. So it's a night, it's a blessed night. The Quran says, "Tanazzalul malaikatu warruhu fiha bi'izni rabbihim min kulli amrin salam," that it's a night in which it is peace all over until daylight, and that is all that we come to know about it. As far as the fact is concerned, whether it comes every year, we have no clue about that. So the behavior of a believer is that because he doesn't know whether it's going to come this year or whether it's going to come on the 21st or 23rd, the behavior of a believer is that he tries to be vigilant in all these odd nights, because you never know it would fall on one of these nights. And that is what perhaps God also wanted and the Prophet also wanted, because he didn't give one single day, otherwise everyone would have concentrated on just that day. He just said that all that I remember is the last 10 days, odd nights of the last 10 days. And as I can also think that this conjecture and is also very true, that that doesn't mean that it comes every year in those last odd nights as well. So all that we can expect is that I mean, whenever it comes, it comes on an odd night, or the last 10 days of an odd night, and we need to be more vigilant in those odd nights of the last 10 days, and that is all. Now, how people have expressed their experience of seeing that night is various. I mean, some people think that it's they saw the world as if everything had become white in light, and they saw as if as the trees are also sort of prostrating. And I mean, everyone has his own experience to tell, but that is something which has never been shared by any authority or any the Prophet himself or the Quran himself. So it's like saying that it's a night which is a blessed night. It's a night in which we would like to be present and worship the Almighty as much as we can, but it has not been divulged as far as the exact dates of a night is concerned. Of that night is concerned, and I said it's very befitting indeed, because this makes us more vigilant, and we do. I mean, we spread our worship rituals on all these odd nights.
Okay, and does that also mean that if we experience Laylatul Qadr, that our worship will be times 1,000 months, because they say it's more worth than 1,000 months?
So it says Laylatul Qadr khairum min alf shahr. Then that night is better than the worship, in that night is better than the nights which follow in those 1,000 months. So yes, that is what the Quran says. The word 1,000 here actually refers to not the exact number, but it's like it refers to something which is plentiful. When we say 1,000, I mean, it's not that we are counting 1,000. What we are saying is that it is better than several nights. It's like it's an expression of something being large in number.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Our next question asks, when performing the Tarawih prayer before Fajr, how do you pray the Tarawih prayer? What are the steps to doing that, and how many rak'ahs do you do?
I mean, you have to pray the Tarawih in odd numbers. That is what we know. So you can offer those nawafils, the nafils in two, and then you can make three at the end, like the time we pray, like the way we pray witrs. So two, and three. And the Prophet also had some other ways that he would pray. He would pray 4 as well. But I think the easiest way to remember as well is that you can pray 2 rakats. I mean, as much as you can, 2, 4, 6, 8. But in the last, at the end, you pray 3 witrs. So that will make it odd. So whether you pray 7 or maybe 11 or 13 or whatever is convenient to you, you can finish those even number of rakat by 3 witrs. You can pray 2 nafils and then pray 3 witr. You can pray 4 nafils and then pray 3 witr. I mean, it's up to you. It depends on how much time you have. It depends how fresh you are. So there is a variation. But the minimum amount is 3 witrs. So the minimum is 3, and the maximum is as much as you can. So it could be 3, 5, 7, 9, 11.
So
and
just
more.
For clarification, the 3 that you pray at the end, do you do it like Maghrib, or do you do like 2
No,
and then you stop?
You do it like Maghrib.
Okay, so you can't do like 1 by itself.
No. You have to do it like Maghrib.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So our next question comes from Aruba. Please go ahead.
Assalamualaikum. My question was that earlier you said that the Tarawih prayer, even at the time of Caliph Umar, it was like people used to pray like 3, 5, or 7. But nowadays in the mosque, it's like 20 is like the distinct number. Like that's prayed in every single mosque, at least in Pakistan. So I was just saying that how did it evolve to like 20?
I mean, from the times of Umar, it expanded, and people used to pray. For example, we know in the times of Imam Malik, 49 rakats were prayed because it's an odd number. And then, I mean, various countries and various schools of thought adopted different numbers. In Indo-Pak, we pray either 20 or 8. So the people who call themselves Ahlul Hadith, they pray 8. The Hanafis, they pray 20. And they insist that these are the number of rakats, and they have their own reasoning. Other than that, this, as I said, it's just something a number that they've just adopted as a stable number, or a number that they think is what they should do. People who pray 8 rakat, for example, they copy the Prophet, and we know that the Prophet never prayed more than 11 rakat of the Tahajjud, because Aisha anha used to say this. But remember, for him, it was an entirely different thing. For him, the Tahajjud prayer was a mandatory prayer. So for him, it had to be a certain amount that he had to offer. And that is why the Ahlul Hadith, they think that you have to follow the Prophet and you follow whatever he did. The Hanafis have their own reasoning. But at the end of, I mean, the bottom line is that because it's an optional prayer, because it is left to your own discretion, the number of rakat of these prayers is immaterial, as long as you pray it in the odd number.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Shabana Ansari. So please go ahead.
अस्सलामुअलैकुम।
वालेकुम अस्सलाम।
डॉक्टर साहब, अगर मेरा कुछ मिस हो गया था प्रोग्राम बीच में से, हो सकता है आपने बताया हो, तो वो अगर किसी के साथ हॉस्पिटल जाना हो 2-3 दिन अटेंडेंट के तौर पे, तो उसमें अगर मुश्किल पेश आ रही हो रोजे रखने में या और मसाइल की वजह से कुछ, तो फिर उसको भी स्किप कर सकते हैं और फिर बाद में कज़ा रख लें।
Yes, I mean anything that, I mean, forces you, or any compulsion that comes your way in which you're not able to fast, there is this provision in which you can give up that fast and make it up in other parts of the year.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. We have another question from Akram Bhatti. So please unmute yourself.
Okay, my question was about the odd rakah. Some Pakistani ulama, mostly they say Dua Qanut before the
before going before kneeling. Yeah,
before kneeling. And Arabic people in here, when they are leading, they will say after they say they get up from kneeling and then do it. So which is the proper way, or doesn't matter?
Doesn't matter. Both are. I mean, both are fine. To be honest, we are not exactly sure about the Prophet in this regard, and it does seem that he probably used both these ways.
Okay. And somebody said I don't do that, but somebody say you can say as many rakats without the sitting on atayat, and then at the end you can sit and.
I mean, there are different ways, and the Prophet himself, because the Tarawih or Tahajjud prayer, in fact, was mandatory upon him. So in order to not make it monotonous, he would pray in various ways. I mean, he would pray in twos, he would pray in fours, but he would always make them odd near the end.
Thank you. Next we have Baran Nashor. Can you please unmute yourself?
Yes. My other question about the fast was, sometimes when you are brushing your teeth or you're cleaning your mouth for wudu, and you're trying to spit everything out, sometimes I have the feeling that something is still remaining, but I cannot get rid of it, and like spit is also like accumulating, and I have to swallow. And I'm afraid that sometimes maybe some water from the thing is slipped through the throat. So I don't know, should I be worried about this? Even though
no, you don't need to be worried about that, because I mean, this is something which swallowing is something that comes naturally to us. I mean, we are also swallowing our own saliva as well. So whenever we eat food and you just spit it out or you gargle it out, even then there is this feeling that there is something that has gone inside of yourself. But in fact, that is something which is like a voluntary or an involuntary reaction of your own biological system. So you need not worry about that. All that you should worry about is that you should not deliberately swallow something.
Okay, thank you very much.
For all inadvertent swallowings, they will be inshallah forgiven.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. We have our next question from the chat that asks, is the minimum Tarawih prayer 2 rak'ahs plus 3?
The minimum is 3.
The minimum is 3.
3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I actually had a question related to that. So I'm still a bit confused about like the 3 that you do like Maghrib, because sometimes when you're praying with the Jama'ah and then you're like, okay, I want to leave after 8 rak'ahs, do you do like 2 more with the Jama'ah, so you have 10, and then once the Imam ends, you get
that's entirely up to you. I mean, you can pray 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 in the Jamaat if you are going to offer it with the Isha prayer. and you can pray the three at the tahajjud time. So it's like supplementing that with those witrs.
If you want to do it during that time, is that possible to do it? Like,
yes, I mean, if you want to offer the witr with the isha, of course that's possible. I mean, that's what people normally do.
No, sorry, I mean, if you want to end it, so like when the imam has ended the last two that you wanted to pray, are you gonna get up and then continue with the third
you just
one?
leave. You just leave, and then the remaining three or whatever the number that you can offer at the tahajjud time.
Okay.
So that is how people at times they mix the two. I mean, they offer part of it with the isha. I mean, they offer some nafils, let's say 2, 4, 6, or whatever they can, and then in the night they offer the odd numbers. That would be minimum of 3, or it could be 5, 7 as well.
Sorry, I feel like I'm not explaining myself well, because usually I go at the behind the sufuf and then I offer like 1. So now I know that's wrong, because I was just
you have to offer 3. Yeah, basically. Okay. Yeah. And this misunderstanding has actually occurred because of a narrative of the Prophet. And someone asked him about the witr prayer. He said, "Awtir bi wahida," which means make it odd by 1. So people thought that they have to pray 2, and making it odd would mean that they pray 1 more to make it odd. That was not what the Prophet was saying. He was saying that you should pray 3. Awtir bi wahida would mean that you add 1 more to the even number to make it odd. That's what he was saying. But people thought that he's perhaps saying that you add 1 to the 2 that you've already prayed, and hence people thought that you could also pray 1 witr. So by not understanding this narrative of the Prophet, the issue of 1 witr has arisen.
Okay, thank you so much for that clarification. That was it for all of the questions today. Really appreciate you taking the time to explain to us how to do Ramadan the proper way. And inshallah, I hope we're all looking forward to a very fruitful and successful Ramadan. And Ramadan Mubarak to everyone in advance. So that is it for all of the questions today. Inshallah, we'll be having our Ramadan series starting tomorrow. Dr. Saleem, can you tell us about the timings and what it's going to be like?
So it will be whenever there is first of Ramadan in the country that I live, which is Pakistan. So I don't think it will be tomorrow. In any case, it would be either day after tomorrow or on Wednesday. So the first of Ramadan in Pakistan, whenever it's going to fall, that is the time in which we will have this Ramadan session. And this series actually would be conducted at 9 p.m. Pakistan Standard Time every day from 9 to 9:30 or 9:35. We'll have a very short 10 or 15 minutes of a small talk on a particular passage of the Quran which relates to our character and moral uplift, and then we'll have 10 or 15 minutes of live Q&A every day.
Ramadan Mubarak in advance, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.